Did you hear that? Dude, what the hell is that noise? Dude, this is freaking me out. What the... Oh. I see. I should have known it would be you.
If there's something strange, it's sleeping in your bed.
I don't know why this ended up being a Halloween series. It just did. Fire Emblem Fates Birthright is pretty commonly seen as the most solid entry in the Fates lineup because it's the least bad. Like, the story is pretty inoffensive for the most part and doesn't have the dumber aspects that Conquest and Revelations have. And the gameplay is the same build broken units, watch them go formula that was proven effective by Awakening. But the title of the series is Fixing Fates, so let's see if we can take Birthright's story from passable to great. And there are a few things that I actually do want to change, the first and foremost being the... After the route split, the first chapter is just Nohr invades, and as a justification for a Fire Emblem battle, it's...
nice.
But, like, if you frame the chapter from anyone other than Corrin's perspective, it's incredibly suspicious. Like, even without the changes I made to the prologue, let's take this from anyone in Hoshido's perspective. This Nohrian shows up in the capital claiming to be the lost princess that was captured by Nohr 15 odd years ago, so like, fair enough, but then their sword publicly explodes in the middle of the town square, killing Mikoto and dispelling the magic barrier keeping Nohr from invading, and wouldn't you believe it, the most influential and powerful Nohrian commanders just happened to be waiting at the border at that exact moment that the barrier went down. And to her credit, the princess did help ward off the Nohrian forces, but none of them died. And now, the next time the Nohrians invade, the princess pulls the Nohrian general leading the charge into the Hoshidan army.
You don't find that suspicious?
I'm not saying these plot points should change, mind you. Far from it, I actually just think that certain characters should point this out. Maybe not Sakura and Hinoka immediately. They don't seem like the type to think, but someone should eventually understandably be wigged out by Corrin. So let this chapter play out the same way, but when Corrin recruits Silas, perhaps have someone push back a little bit and have that serve as a setup for later. For the time being, we move on to the... I genuinely have no idea what the idea behind the Wind Tribe was supposed to be, especially since Fates makes it super unclear whether we're actually killing them during their maps or not, but we will get to that in a second. Because the setup for this chapter is dumb from the start. In case you don't remember, this chapter starts with Corrin and company on the Eternal Staircase when they get jumped by Faceless and kill them, only for it to be revealed that they were actually the Wind Tribe. And Iago just used his magic to make it look like they were Faceless. And also, the Wind Tribe saw this and are super pissed at Corrin now, so they have to fight. Couple problems with that. First off, how did Corrin not realize that she was phasing through the majority of her opponent's bodies? Like, the Faceless are a fair bit bigger than your normal dudes, and they're fighting with swords and spears. They should have noticed that the thing they were cutting through had no resistance for the majority of the time that they were cutting. But even putting that aside, the response from the Wind Tribe makes no sense. Because at first, they're like, "How dare you kill our people? We will avenge them!" But then it's treated as a pseudo-reveal that this was all just a test from Fuga to see if Corrin was worthy. Since it's never explicitly stated that you aren't killing Wind Tribe members, and the Wind Tribe members are explicitly killing you, it makes Fuga come across as psychotic. The way I would recommend fixing this is a way that will kind of set up the Nohr to be dishonorable instigators, and to do this we're going to save the reveal of Iago's deception until the end of the chapter, because throughout the rest of this chapter, Corrin and company will see the Wind Tribe members as Nohrian soldiers. Let the fact that they're fighting with katanas and maces be the thing that tips off the player. Then, as Fuga dies at the end of the chapter, Iago can step out and evilly twirl his mustache or something like that. Now the player can have a little bit more of a personal grudge against Nohr and see firsthand how devious their tactics actually are. Plus, it further cements that what transpired in the prologue was absolutely part of Garon's plan. Alright. Now that brings us to... Aside from Corrin's main motivation for this chapter being falling for the most obvious trap since Roadrunner, I still do quite like the joke of Zola's perfect recreation of Izana being the thing that gives him away, but it seemed a little overdone to do it in both routes. And because this is technically the first route that players are probably going to play, I would actually go back and fix it in Conquest instead of in Birthright, but I mean, I can't do that now, so I guess we'll just move on. As for the rest of this setup, it's frankly ridiculous for how straightforward this chapter is. Like, hey Corrin and Sakura, come hang out with me in this tiny closet. I promise nothing bad will happen. And it working is pretty stupid. Like, I get that this is supposed to highlight how naive they are, and yeah, it serves that purpose, but why on earth did you include the detail of them allowing themselves to be led into an empty storage closet? There's naive, and then there's, oh geez, Mr. Izana, you'll give me a whole candy bar and all I have to do is climb into your van? Just make it an actual sauna. You can't even tell what it's supposed to be on the battle map. As for the end of this chapter, it's fine. The one main change that I think I want to make here is having Zola join Corrin's army now instead of at the start of the next chapter. Have Leo be about to execute him, and while he's begging for his life, Corrin steps in and is like, no, he's part of the Hoshiden army now, and killing him violates the ceasefire in Izumo. This creates tension for both parties because the smartest royal, Leo, is getting outmaneuvered by Corrin of all people, and the Hoshidans can be like, hey, geez, Corrin, you sure are bringing a bunch of Nohrians into our ranks. Hopefully they don't slit our throats in our sleep. Which, speaking of slitting throats in your sleep, not much happens in this chapter, and honestly, it's a video game. It's fine to have a little bit of filler, especially when it serves to build the world and expand on some of the side characters. Besides the story happening in the background, this chapter is good. The main plot-relevant thing that happens in this chapter is that Takumi shows up super possessed and Azura sings him a song and gives him a Snickers bar and he stops trying to kill everything that moves. Once again, the pacing on this is just way too fast. Takumi needs to be a little bit more suspicious of Corrin. After all, Azura is the one who helped him, not Corrin, and he already knows that Azura is good. He's known her since they were like 4. Plus, if nobody else has done it by now, he can point out that Corrin is putting their party in very questionable company. Even if she's not doing so maliciously, she's still at least way too trusting of Nohrian soldiers. Also, the game foreshadows Azura's fate here, and I think that's neat, but it happens way too much later on, so this is just a blanket kind of going forward. Don't make every other chapter have an Azura dying from her song moment. It's way too overblown. Anyways, on to This is a filler chapter. Valite soldiers jumped out of the sea and attacked the ship. And the way that you make this better is just by framing the chapter from Azura's perspective. Make the audience know that she knows what's going on and highlight, oh, what a coincidence. The Valites came from the water, Azura uses water magic. I wonder if that's related. Just show Azura's reaction, and it would go a tremendous length in strengthening her characterization while recontextualizing this scene for people who have already played the other routes. Zola tanking a hit for Takumi and having the genre awareness to go, hey, we're in a world with healing magic, I will probably be fine, is also a good tidbit. I like that. Man, this route has so much stuff that I like. Boy, I can't wait to get to Revelations. Now, we've been going on for quite a while, and I've been building the idea that the siblings should be somewhat doubtful of Corrin still, and that is finally going to come to a head in... I'm not going to talk about Azura's song much because it really is just not that relevant to this route, which I guess is a problem in and of itself, but in order to make my version of Conquest work as a second playthrough, I think we should remain somewhat vague. The same setup can still happen. The random dancer woman wants to go visit her dying mother, and Azura says her song will take care of Garon. When it fails, it can be revealed that Garon was tipped off about what Azura was doing and took the necessary precautions to stop her. This could be anti-magic, earplugs, or anything else, it doesn't really matter. Then, when the Nohrian ambush comes pouring in, all eyes turn to Corrin, who doesn't know what's happening. Despite that, Garon, if you haven't watched the rest of my series, his character has been changed from Murder McEvilman to just a manipulator, is like, yes, thank you, Corrin, for helping me corner the Hoshiden royals. Now it's time for you to come home where you belong. The Hoshiden siblings feel betrayed, and when Corrin is like, I don't know what's going on here, Zola can step forward to Garon's side and be like, of course you do, right? Wink. And this is when Corrin finally fully earns the trust of her siblings by condemning Zola and vowing to put an end to Garon's machinations. From there, the map can play out exactly the same. Xander breaking off to chase down Corrin only to be stopped by Elise doesn't really need to be changed. It's not bad characterization and sets up a dynamic that leads to Elise's ultimate fate. This is Camilla's first big part in Birthright, and she comes across like a fucking lunatic. And I am actually cool with that characterization, showing the darker side of her obsession and having her be like, well, if you don't want to be with me, then I will just kill you and then you'll be mine, is a really interesting twist of that obsessive archetype. And it actually makes sense given Camilla's relationship with Corrin because, like, yeah, man, that's not normal behavior. That's your sister. If anything, I'd actually dial up the psychoness of her behavior and pull back the sexiness aspect of it. Like, it's almost cliche at this point to say that Camilla is a bit much, but I mean, come on. But yeah, giving her more serial killer, crazy stalker vibes would really help her characterization. I don't love her having an
I've been defeated, but I can't fall here
moment, but considering that she has to come back for her personal chapter, it's just something that I have to accept. Plus, we finally get the introduction of Ryoma, disguised as a fortress knight, which segments us into the... Chapter 14 is the Invasion of Nohr, where we invade Nohr by invading a Nohrian fortress. That's it! We get a little bit of world building with Scarlet and some characterization for Ryoma about him being cautious, I guess. But Zola didn't die in this version, so I want to give him a little bit more to do here. So we're going to add a cutscene of him talking to the chapter boss and explaining that Garon is pissed that the ambush failed and that he is holding Zola responsible. So he tells the boss of this map that she needs to bring him the heads of the Hoshidan royals. Zola doesn't show up on this map, but he does make his presence known as a lingering antagonistic force instead of just showing up once and immediately dying after betraying you like in the original Birthright. Anyways, the next chapter is So this chapter is bad for all the reasons the Kitsune map is bad in Conquest. It's pointless, contrived, and worse still, the Birthright version doesn't even have an interesting game mechanic behind it. But I do know a way to tie it into the overarching plot, especially since we have a lingering antagonist who needs some screen time. So, this chapter starts with a wounded Wolfskin running to Keaton saying that he was injured by hunters. He warns Keaton that the hunters pretended to be friendly with him, then tried to kill him for his pelt. Keaton takes off to go avenge his friend, and when he's gone, the injured Wolfskin transforms into Zola, revealing that he has been duping the Wolfskins into fighting Hoshido. Then we get to Corrin and company heading into Wolfskin territory, when Keaton confronts Corrin and vows for revenge for his injured friend. Corrin pleads ignorance and tries to befriend Keaton, and Keaton says something along the lines of, "I'm not falling for that." Battle ensues. So this is the chapter where Kaze dies if Corrin doesn't like him enough, and the chapter doesn't really support that, like just from a mechanics to story standpoint. It just don't make no sense. If Kaze doesn't like Corrin enough, he does a self-sacrifice to save her, but if he likes her a whole lot, he gets to live because... Obviously, I'd like to remove this entirely because story deaths of blue units in these games are dumb, but if you have to keep it, change it so that it makes sense for Corrin's opinion of Kaze to determine whether he lives or dies. So, when you finish the chapter, the Hoshidans are standing over the bodies, talking about how killing those guys made them feel sad. Then, the dead Wolfskin rise back up and mutate until they transform into Faceless. Injured from the previous battle, Corrin and company begin to retreat over a bridge, and when the Faceless pile onto the bridge, it snaps before Kaze can make it across, and he falls to his death. Only, if you have the support requirements, Corrin will throw herself into the chasm after him, only surviving because Hinoka just barely manages to reach Corrin as Corrin just barely manages to reach Kaze. Then, we can pan back to Zola, who's worried about something when Iago shows up and says something along the lines of, "It was a cute idea to lure them into fighting the Wolfskin and raising them as Faceless to ambush the Hoshidans. Too bad it didn't work." Zola can start to make excuses when Iago tells him that he has one last chance to stop them from getting into Nohr, but luckily he has an insider who knows exactly where they're going. So, in Chapter 16, I love how laughably evil Iago is, but we can that for the sake of a proper through line. The setup for this map is the same, of course. Takumi gets sick and disabled for the map, all while the Hoshidans and company get ambushed by Nohrian soldiers. The only major change that I'm making is that it's Zola doing the ambushing instead of Iago. Instead of being confident and sadistic like Iago, Zola will be much more panicked, almost acting nervous during the confrontation. When the player beats the map, Zola, the rat that he is, will begin begging and bargaining once again. He says that he's sorry for betraying them and begging to be taken back into their custody, and even saying that there's a traitor among them and that he knows who it is. Of course, Corrin has learned her lesson by this point and more sensibly realizes that Zola will never change, so she 86s him herself, finally showing some actual character development.
The building is on fire!
Having Flora betray Corrin for the sake of her tribe is totally believable, but since this version has a different characterization for Garon, we're going to change the reasoning a bit to match with that. Plus, there's a few problems in execution that genuinely make this chapter seem really dumb. For one, Flora kills herself for no good reason. She just does it. It's like vaguely implied that her dying will stop Garon from going after her people, but that's kind of shaky, so we'll be making a few tweaks accordingly. Anyways, remember how in Conquest the Ice Tribe was destroying Nohrian monuments and Corrin was sent to quell their rebellion? Well, in this version the same happened, but instead of sending Corrin, Garon was going to send Hans, which would have led to total annihilation of the Ice Tribe. So, Flora pleaded for clemency, and Garon, in his infinite mercy, said that he wouldn't send Hans if Flora could manage to kill Corrin or die trying. It's not fully bulletproof and requires Flora to get the Ice Tribe to go along with this off-screen, but I do think it sharpens up some of the characterization. And now that brings us to Leo's chapter is notoriously underwhelming, weak enemy spam, but that's not what we're covering right now. This chapter treats Leo very weirdly. He goes on this tirade before the fight about how he's always hated Corrin, and then he takes it all back like immediately afterwards, like right after the chapter, and then he kind of vanishes for the rest of the plot, only to reappear at the very end with a one-sentence wrap-up for his character saying that he's the king of Nohr now. But all that aside, if you watched my last video, you know my opinion on any of the main royals surviving the route that you don't pick. But the main problem is, in this version, I can't just say Garon kills the Lamau, which, as you'll soon find out, is only really a problem for Leo, who is just too reasonable of a character, so we'll be making a couple changes. First off, I actually like the angle that he's kind of had this resentment bubbling within him that's gone unspoken simply because he felt like he needed to play peacekeeper with his sister, and when she betrays them, he lets it all come to the forefront and makes an emotional decision to go after her. I actually think the one thing I want to add here is that he sets up a barrier around the forest that will prevent them from leaving so long as either he or Corrin draws breath. That way, either he dies or she dies. He can't back out, she can't escape. And as it turns out, as the chapter progresses, he starts struggling to kill Corrin as much as she's struggling to kill him. And after he's defeated, he regretfully tells her that he set up the barrier in a way where it cannot be dispelled until either he or her is dead. You can have as much bargaining and refusal to accept it as you want, but what's done is done. So, Corrin does what she must. The act of which nearly breaks her, but the journey is not complete. And so... Now, the next few chapters are just kind of filler. In base Birthright, we teleport to the Rainbow Sage, which is certainly a decision, but I don't really see why it's necessary. We're going through the Conquest maps in reverse orders, so like, yeah, it's not a linear path, but we can just have something like Leo in his dying breath, feeling terrible for not trusting Corrin and putting her in that position, telling her to travel by port because Xander is planning an ambush should he fail in his attempt. Then we can go to the Rainbow Sage, Fort Dragonfall, and Burning Falls maps. Again, I could make some bigger changes here, like replacing the Valite soldiers on the Burning Falls map with something more fitting, but it's currently October 21st, and I'm supposed to have this video done by Halloween, and I haven't even started recording yet. I actually really like Hidden Capital, and I don't really think anything needs to change about this chapter, except maybe the map itself, but that's not in my jurisdiction. The world building is shockingly competent, with a solid way of delivering both exposition and characterization, with Elise heading into the underground trade city as a way of getting away from the tension that is bubbling in the main Nohrian castle. So, good job, Fates! Now, on to the next sibling chapter. I've already said I don't have a problem with Camilla's characterization in Birthright, and in this chapter, I think we should double down on it instead of backpedaling like they did in the original Birthright. So, having gotten news of Leo's death and seeing that the Hoshidans have taken Elise too, Cabela has fully lost it and has transitioned into, I'm going to kill you and get rid of the ugliness that caused you to betray Nohr. Then you will be my beautiful corpse forever. And she's so far gone that she is willing to die herself to preserve Corrin's beauty. And so, she does. And as she lies bleeding out, she curses the Hoshidans for brainwashing her precious sisters, learning nothing, and dying alone. The next chapter is just a filler chapter wrapping up loose ends with Haas, but I did get a suggestion from the comments that I really liked regarding Lilith, and that was, instead of killing her, put her actual stat block in a combat, and if the player did a good job raising her, she survives. Anyways, on to... This chapter sucks. I like Iago, don't get me wrong, but this chapter is so corny. The whole idea of the traitor is half-baked already, but I think we can kind of fix it through unreliable narrators. Specifically, we have Zola be wrong about there being a traitor in the first place because of the way that Iago gave him his intel. Plus, we kind of already had a traitor in the party with Flora, so I think it would make sense for Corrin and company to think that that's who Zola was talking about. But anyways, Iago reveals that he's been seeing their movements through Takumi's eyes, and since he's not like a possessed demon in this version, he gets to actually react with shock and anger. When they understandably demand to know how Iago did it, Iago taunts them and basically says,
"Wouldn't you like to know, Weather Boy?"
When in truth, Iago doesn't know himself. But the player will know because the crystal he sees through Takumi's eyes with will be radiating Valite magic. Then, instead of Leo coming in with the RKO out of nowhere, he's already dead, so Corrin and company just kill Iago themselves. Man, I never really thought about it, but why is Leo just Corrin's executioner in these games? Anyways, this brings us to likely the most controversial chapter in all of Fates. This chapter is pretty notorious for horribly assassinating Xander's character. He kills Elise, and then instead of listening to her dying wishes or Corrin or anyone else, he forces Corrin to continue their duel and then throws it because he's sad that he killed his sister. It's just kind of a pointless and cruel thing to do to Corrin, especially in this version where Leo and Camilla are already dead. So, in this version, we are gonna make some slight tweaks. First, the duel starts at the start of the chapter, and Elise jumps between them, but only after the chapter is over. Also note, I said Elise jumps between them. Not blocks Xander, not blocks Corrin. She is just trying to break up the fighting through any means necessary, because she is not trying to get Hoshido to win. She is trying to stop the fighting because she doesn't like it. So, when she goes down, both Xander and Corrin rush to her, and Elise begs them both to stop fighting. So, they agree to go speak with Garon and try and facilitate peace talks. Surely, if this is just over land, Garon will be open to negotiating for Elise's sake. That leads us into Garon. When Xander enters the room to speak with Garon, Garon immediately calls Xander a traitor and demands that he turn his blade on Corrin this instant. Xander refuses, obviously, turning to help Corrin plead her case, and in that moment, Garon quite literally stabs him in the back before saying the same thing Leo did in his chapter.
Norian law is blunt on the subject of traitors. There is only one punishment. The sentence is death.
In other words, Garon kills him, Lamau. He then turns to Corrin and expresses mild annoyance at her having killed or ruined all of his useful children, but he still has a use for her, so if she turns her blade on the Hoshidans, he'll allow her to live. Corrin denies him and tells him that he's the most wretched sort of man and that the world is better off without him, then gets the anime power up and the battle begins. The final battle plays out, and when we get to phase 2, we don't need Corrin to die and go to heaven just to be absolved of her own actions from the people who were affected by them. Why is this in both games? What is the it's so unnecessary. Garon powers up and curses Corrin for ruining everything, then says that all they have done has stalled his progress by a generation. A line that will not make sense until Revelations. Azura sings her song and dies, and when Garon is finally defeated, he says, this isn't the end, only a setback. From there, we wrap up the story. Ryoma unites Nohr and Hoshido, swearing to take care of the Nohrians that have had to live their lives without sunlight, and they go home. Korrin's adoptive family is gone, as is Azura, but the day is won. Still, something seems off. Garon's dying words will stick with them for the rest of their lives, and they'll need to be prepared for whatever comes next. And that's your cue to go by Revelation.